Thank you so much for having me here this evening. There are some legends in invasive species, tackling invasive species already, I can see on the chat, which is fantastic. Really inspired by what's done with the Inishowen Rivers Trust and the Loch Carra Catchment Association as well. So keep up the good work. You've put in a monumental amount of effort. So I'm quite new to the data centre. I've been working for the data centre just coming on to 6 months now. Prior to that, I worked on a eradication project. So I worked on the very different side of invasive species. So it's really nice to actually work a little bit more on the prevention. And invasive species can be quite a negative topic sometimes, and it can feel all doom and gloom. So what I really want to do when I'm talking about biosecurity is try and empower people and show people that you can actually make a difference. And we all do have a responsibility to play. And the great thing with biosecurity is it can be really simple and can be really accessible as well. So I know there is quite a few groups here this evening that have probably done a fair bit on invasive species and biosecurity already. So if you have any ideas or you want to contact me, my email address, I'll make that available to you as well. So this presentation isn't really going to be listing off the invasive species that you can see in your local area. It's not really going to talk about each individual invasive species. I really want this to focus more on the biosecurity. I think everyone here today will know what an invasive species is and has probably had to deal with it in their time through the work that they do or the volunteering that they do as well. So I wanted to quickly speak about some of the projects and initiatives that I'm working on at the moment. And we do actually have Sheena and Martin from the Sligo Bay Catchment Rivers Trust with us this evening. So if they want to speak about this as well, please feel free to unmute and have a little chat. But a couple of months ago, we had a gentleman called Noel Rafferty who was looking at Himalayan balsam taking over Sligo, especially in the north of Sligo, and he really wanted to take action. So he brought a few stakeholders together, including the Biodiversity Officer from Sligo County Council, the local conservation ranger from MPWS, the local community water officer from LawPro, and myself from the data centre, and also the Sligo Bay Catchment River Trust. And he came with the proposal of wanting to actually take some action and remove Himalayan balsam. The reason why Himalayan balsam was chosen is because it is actually an accessible invasive species that volunteers can actually remove. A lot of things when it comes to invasive species, if you want to go down the removal and management route, there is a lot of rope that you have to push through to even get to the point where you can remove them due to legislation and regulation and maybe specialist knowledge and equipment needed. Whereas Himalayan balsam, anyone can have a go at. So one of the issues with invasive species is because of those regulations and legislation, you do need quite a lot when you are setting up a volunteer group to remove invasive species. So Sligo Bay Catchment Rivers Trust were absolutely amazing in supporting this group and are now sponsoring this group, and Martin is going to help kind of run the project as well. And the reason why we thought it'd be really good for Sligo Bay to take this on is because Himalayan balsam is, although it's a riparian species, it does grow along the riverbeds, and it is a huge problem in Sligo. But we were able to kind of get around one of the barriers that local action groups have, which is insurance, risk assessments, health and safety, and having people to really manage that group. And by being part of an already existing group, like a Rivers Trust, that really does help these little action groups that want to remove species. Is there anything else, Martin or Sheena, you would like to add? I don't think Noel is here this evening.
I would, Chantel, but you've covered most of the points there. No, you're good. Carry on, but I might jump in.
Yeah, no problem. So this kind of leads to another larger initiative that we're working on at the moment at the data centre, which is actually looking at supporting these groups that want to take action against invasive species. There is something running in GB called the Local Action Group they have a toolkit, and they also have a workshop that they run too. And this is run every single year. And we are at the moment working with GB to develop our own invasive species toolkit, which will be a resource that local action groups can use to help set up their group and run their group. And then we are going to be running a local action group workshop as well. This will be running once a year. We have our first one on the 24th of March. So keep an eye on inboxes, because there's a few people in the group that I will be inviting as well to talk about the work that they've been doing, to share their successes, and also for us to try and overcome a lot of the barriers and challenges when it comes to invasive species. But one of the big things for the workshop is to really provide a platform for everyone to share this as well. There's so many groups doing so many things, but we don't actually have an area where we can actually get together and speak about that. And then the final thing that we're working on at the moment is to try and help more with the biosecurity element. And we're developing some resources from already existing GB material that's out there, but we're adapting it for the island of Ireland. So one of the ones that we're working on at the moment is looking at biosecurity specifically at sort of paddling events. So not going to dwell too much on the impact of invasives, because if you are part of the Rivers Trust or volunteering or working near the water, you would have absolutely seen the impact of invasive species. But one of the things I kind of want to point out is the cost of invasive species, of actually controlling and managing them. I spoke about in that previous slide there about it's been quite a monumental thing to try and get groups together to tackle invasive species when you're wanting to remove them and you're very, very restricted. So the annual economic cost of invasive species across the island of Ireland is 261 million euros. This is per year. And this report was done back in 2013. So I can only imagine now what that cost is. I imagine it's grown a huge amount. There are some reports that have come out from this year, but I don't have access to the figures yet, but hopefully I'll be able to send some more updated figures. And these are expenses that are related to actually controlling the invasive species once they get here and establish, because it does impact so much of things that we rely on and a lot of our industries, for example, agriculture, forestry, fisheries and infrastructure. And then we kind of have those big issues on what it does to the natural environment as well, that it does cause local extinctions, it does cause species decline, and really can affect habitats as well. So what actually is biosecurity? So the term that you'll find if you kind of Google what biosecurity is, you'll probably come across something like it's a set of measures and precautions taken to prevent or minimize the introduction and spread of invasive species or pathogens. But I can give it to you in real simple terms. It is just a real fancy word for cleaning. And we've seen biosecurity in many ways kind of recently through history. And we probably didn't know that it was biosecurity that we were doing at the time. And the problem is with biosecurity, it is a change of mindset, and we are really asking people to change their behaviours when it comes to implementing biosecurity. But we have done it in the past. A real recent example, I know it seems like it was long ago now, but COVID, all those measures that we put into place to protect ourselves, the hand washing, the wearing the masks, that was measures called, that is actually biosecurity. And then also with sort of foot and mouth disease and mad cow disease, all those kind of washing your boots and things before you enter and leave a farmland, all of that are also biosecurity measures. So we do practice them and we can adopt them. And biosecurity is really crucial in tackling invasive species, because it does just take one person that hasn't cleaned their equipment properly to spread an invasive species. But I don't want this to be doom and gloom. And when I said very early on in the presentation about we all have a responsibility and role to play, and that's the case when it comes to biosecurity. When you think of trying to tackle a lot of the global threats to our natural environment, if you're trying to tackle climate change impacts, for example, you may try and get the bus to work instead of driving. And the only real way that that is going to actually minimize the impacts of climate change is if you're not the only one doing that, you inspire other people to also go maybe and start to get the bus. So it's the larger scale of things when it comes to those global threats to the natural environment. But when it comes to invasive species and biosecurity, what you do as an individual definitely does make a difference. So by practicing biosecurity, as an individual, you are stopping the spread of invasive species.
Chantal, you've muted.
Yeah.
Hi.
So why am I talking about biosecurity here? Why is it so important? Why am I not talking about how we can remove, for example, zebra mussels? Why am I talking more about this prevention? And I think the term prevention is better than the cure, I think, was made for this element of tackling invasive species. And the reason why it's so important is because eradicating a species once it's actually established is extremely difficult. And the more and more it spreads, that it's really, really hard to tackle. So before I actually worked in Ireland at the data centre, I worked on a large scale eradication project trying to remove stoats from an island. And it's still to date one of the most expensive projects for that organisation. And it was extremely labour intensive. And even if they feel like they're being successful, that's the project that has the highest risk of failure. You either fail or you succeed. There's no in between with that. And in terms of how much it costs, we saw that figure earlier on. That was 261 million euros per year to try and control invasives. And that number is probably already grown and is going to continue to grow as well. And unfortunately, there does get to the point as well when you're actually looking at the environment that once an invasive species has established in an area, it's actually done so much damage, it's actually irreversible. That might be it's potentially caused a local extinction of a species. It may have changed the habitat so much that it's only that invasive species that's going to exist there now. And it's really changed the ecosystem, that even if you do intervene, manage and control that area, it might get to the point where that damage is irreversible. So we really, really need to start thinking about the steps before removing and managing an invasive species, because it is difficult. There's so much legislation and regulation when you actually have to manage and remove a species. This is something that we can all do. It doesn't require specialized knowledge or someone that has specialized skills or training. This is something we can all do. And especially if we're water users, and that doesn't mean going out kayaking, that can just be you like to take a walk alongside a river or around a loch. We all have an important role to play, and we can absolutely make a difference. So on to the bits of actually what we can do to help and what our role is in biosecurity. So one of the campaigns that the data centre is really trying to get out there, you may have seen it quite a lot before, is the steps called Check, Clean, Dry. They are simple steps of biosecurity measures that you can do to stop the spread of invasive species when you are out using the water. Because invasive species are really, really small. They can be really small and hard to spot, and they can easily spread on damp equipment and clothing. And the waterways is one that's quite a high risk, because especially in Ireland as well, we have huge, for example, the Shannon catchment links up to so many river systems and lochs that if an invasive species is in one part of the Shannon, it doesn't have to do very much to travel along. For example, Himalayan balsam, if it's seeding and you touch a seed, it can explode sort of up to 7 meters away and populate that area. So we all have a role to play with the Check, Clean, Dry. So the thing is with biosecurity, we are always doing more research. Well, we need more research on things like disinfectant and the temperatures of what we suggest is the best temperatures to clean things to actually kind of kill those invasive species. And that may change over the next couple of years. We may get better up-to-date research that tells us specifically these are the best measures to do. But this is what we have at the moment. And the best thing is, first of all, is checking your gear. So and this doesn't just include if you're using the water, if you've just gone out on a walk as well, especially as I mentioned there with Himalayan balsam, although it's grows by the river, those seeds might actually be spreading onto the path that you're walking on as well. So it's also when you're out on walks, checking your footwear too. And if you are in the water, checking your paddles, your gear, your clothing and your equipment, and just seeing if there's actually anything visible that you can actually remove. And the advice is when you do remove it, leave it at that site. Don't go somewhere else, get in the car and think, oh, I just want to stop off here. This spot's a really nice place. And then you notice you've got something on your shoe and you brush it off there. You need to try and remove it and leave it at the site that you're at, because you don't want to spread it further along. Cleaning is the most important step. So clean everything as thoroughly as you can, paying attention to areas that are quite hard to inspect. And the recommendation, and this is the best recommendation, all of the research that has been done, hot water tops everything. It tops disinfectant. It is the best method of cleaning, but to be honest, isn't always accessible for everyone. So there are other options if not, but try and use hot water if you can. And actually the great thing is the household tap actually reaches 45 to 55 degrees. And the recommendation is at least 45 degrees. So even if you can have just access to a hot water tap, that will be great. And then you can also use a high pressure spray. That's very good for the check step as well. That can help remove a lot of the material that you see. This is always something that gets questioned quite a lot being in Ireland. Dry. Dry your gear for as long as you can. These are things that we are asking you to do, these sort of steps, if you can do them. This is the best scenario that you can do. I'm aware that there are going to be barriers and challenges to actually implementing these sorts of measures here. So the idea behind having this sort of discussion as well is to see what is the best solution for you. It's you as an individual that's going out there, and you as an individual can make that change. So you've got to find what suits you as well. So the recommendation is dry your gear for as long as you can, for a sort of at least 48 hours. So disinfectant, this comes up quite a lot. People usually have quite a lot of questions with when it comes to disinfectant. As I mentioned before, cleaning is the best step, and hot water, nothing beats hot water. But if you can't do some of the steps, for example, drying isn't possible. If you can't dry your equipment, there are some things, for example, like crayfish plague that you can't see, that if you dried your equipment, you would be able, that would kill the crayfish plague. But if you can't dry it, what you can do is then actually use disinfectant if you can't dry your equipment. And it's really good at helping prevent the spread of disease and pathogens as well. The best thing to do is trying to soak what you can, your clothing and equipment, for at least 15 minutes. So when you're spraying that on, just spray it on for about 15 minutes and then just rinse it off as much as you can. But just to make sure you do that away from the water's edge. You don't want to be putting any harmful chemicals in the water. So just away, either on the grass, or if there is a pavement. If you don't have access to something like a soak away, just on the pavement or something will be fine. There are quite a few different disinfectants you can use. Things like Virkon Aquatic gets recommended quite a lot. There is positives and negatives for using something like that. Virkon Aquatic is usually used more by kind of professionals, because you do require a risk assessment to be able to use Virkon, and the person needs to have signed that risk assessment and is kind of trained to use Virkon. It is very expensive as well, and you do need to make sure you're following that manufacturer guidance. So something you can obtain from any kind of local supermarket and is more accessible for the general public is a household disinfectant. Milton has been suggested as quite a good one to use because it's made of, go into a little bit of science here. It's made of a aqueous solution, a 2% aqueous solution. And it's a little bit different to other bleaches because it goes through this purification process that removes heavy metal ions, which normally when those metal ions come in contact with the water, it would break down, and the chemical that comes out of that breakdown is what is not good for the water and the animals living in the water bodies. Whereas Milton, actually, that does decompose and it does break down. Those chemicals don't get broken down that way. So when you are using Milton, again, it's just making sure you're using the right dilution for it. So do read the manufacturer guidance. Make sure if you've got a 5-litre bottle that you are correctly diluting that as much as possible. So disinfectants can be a bit of a tricky one. It's more finding what is more accessible for you, and again, kind of what works for you as well. So it'd be good for everyone to have a little think about what would you actually put into your biosecurity kit. So we think about biosecurity, we may think about these big, huge biosecurity stations and facilities at like rowing clubs or fishing clubs. But actually what we can do is biosecurity can be put into a small little handheld kit, and it can be something you can take away with you and bring with you. So it's really accessible, and you can actually buy everything that you need in a supermarket. So it'd be good if everyone has kind of a little think in their mind, what would you put into a biosecurity kit? So think about those steps, the check, the clean, the dry. If you saw some visible plant matter on your shoe, what item might you need to try and kind of get that off your shoe? Thinking about the cleaning, if you don't have access to kind of hot water, or you don't have access to water, there was a great quote from the water lecturer in ATU Sligo, which I will say now because I think it was fantastic. She said there's a big problem because there's water everywhere and not a drop to clean. And that can be one of the barriers sometimes, that you don't actually have access to water to clean despite being near a water body. So thinking about that element, and then how you can dry it as well. So putting together a kit is something I really, really recommend. And then it kind of helps you to get into that rhythm of, okay, I'm going out, I'm near a water body, I'm going swimming, or I'm going fishing, or I'm just taking a walk, but I'm going to pop this in the car. And you just keep repeating that each time, and it just becomes something you do, like you might clean your boots before you go out or something. So a good thing I'd recommend for the check part is a hoof pick and a hard brush. Hoof picks are very, very cheap. You would more find them in an equine store because they're usually used for horses, but you can buy them online and they are very, very cheap, but they're really good to get into those hard to inspect areas and those nooks and crannies too. And then a hard brush is just very good for brushing anything down, and you want it to be a hard material so it is long lasting as well. Quick drying towel is good as well, just to make sure you are getting off any kind of disinfectant and things, and protecting yourself by wearing gloves, especially if you are using things like disinfectant. It's always good to have a little bit of a bowl with you for cleaning as much as you can, and then using a spray bottle for disinfectant as well. So they're just some suggestions there for your biosecurity kit, but your own one may look very different. Personally, I carry around a battery-powered pressure washer. It isn't very large, but it's fantastic because it has a siphon, and you can just pop it into any bit of water. I think 2 litres is kind of the minimum it needs, like a 2-litre bottle, and it will just siphon the water out, and you can actually use it wherever you are because it's battery-powered. So recommend those, they're very good. So if you are part of a club or a group, or even thinking about kind of if you're part of the Rivers Trust, what are the things that you can actually do in that group to make a difference for biosecurity? And the thing I'm going to say first is make sure you reach out for support and guidance where you need it. You're not on your own with this. You can always reach out to the National Biodiversity Data Centre, but also your local biodiversity officer. And there are already quite a lot of Rivers Trust organisations already that are doing a huge amount with invasive species. So just making sure you have that open network and you are engaging with other people. So creating a biosecurity policy is really good. Any new members that you have that join, just making sure that they read and understand the biosecurity policy that you have in place. And that biosecurity policy can just be really simple by saying, we adopt, check, clean, dry. And if you are aware of any areas nearby that might be high risk for some of the invasive species, or you want to put some more information out there on biosecurity, if you've got a bit of funding, you can have some signage there. We, I think with Law Pro and Waterways Island, we've got a lot of signs that are going to be erected soon around the area where the demon shrimp incursions kind of happened and where they've been spotted, just to kind of reiterate to people that biosecurity does really matter. So signage can be really, really important. And then if you are running any events or anything like that, you can set up temporary biosecurity stations because it can be really costly to get permanent infrastructure. So you can just set up temporary stations. They can just be sort of trug buckets that have water and another trug bucket that's got some disinfectant in, some boot scrubbers. It doesn't need to be anything too costly to have biosecurity. And then actually look about training people, getting people to understand why biosecurity is so important. So have potentially some training days for members and local community as well. And you can look external for that for training too. I know INVAS Biosecurity offer quite a lot of training. Sometimes we have some things going on at the data centre as well. And then just making sure you're raising awareness through your channels. There's lots of social media, newsletters that go out. These are really, really important avenues there to raise awareness and make people understand a little bit more on biosecurity. So here's some pictures just demonstrating how important that raising awareness is and engaging with people there. And just to show you some examples of some temporary biosecurity that's been set up. So the bottom picture there, you'll see the sort of trug buckets I mentioned, and they've just got some heavy duty plastic mats to try and collect as much of the disinfectant as they can, so there's not too much runoff. And then there's just a little hook with some brushes and some gloves and things like that above. And then you'll see some pictures to the bottom left of a local kayaking group that have set up some biosecurity, and they have got power washers, but they have got access to water, so they've just been able to attach that to a hose there. So if you are passionate about tackling invasive species and you really want to see what those kind of next steps are in helping, especially when it comes to biosecurity, we are looking at running a bit of an initiative. Would help if I spelled biosecurity right there. I've seen I've missed an R there. But we are looking at recruiting some champions. The problem is with invasive species sometimes is it is an ongoing fight and battle that we have to protect the natural environment. And it can be demotivating sometimes, especially when you're looking at the removal and management of invasive species, because once they've established, it is very hard to get rid of them, and you might just continue to see them even if you try to remove them. Whereas when you are doing something like biosecurity, yes, you can't directly straight away see the impact, but you'll know when your pristine area, you haven't got invasives in there. And I think the Loch Carra Catchment Association, I'm sure you've had talks and things from them before. I think they have a great example of there are still areas in Ireland that are very pristine and need protection. And we absolutely need biosecurity to be an important element in that protection. So we are looking for people to become champions of their local area, and we'll be able to give support and recommendations on what you can do for your local area. And it's looking at those important things there about educating people on biosecurity and why it's so important, but inspiring people as well. It's a really, really simple tool to tackle invasive species. And it is quite a positive thing because you know you're absolutely making a difference as an individual, advocating for it as well, and just promoting as much as you can with biosecurity. So there's lots of resources available on the invasive species website. There's more information on personal biosecurity kits, and there's lots of posters there for you as well if you are running any awareness events or you want to put up any signs too. So there are other ways that you can help. My focus was trying to be on biosecurity and just to show how accessible it is to people. But there are other things that you can do. Reporting sightings of invasive species is really, really important. That citizen science element. With reporting invasive species, the best thing I can recommend is if you can, which is usually fine if it's a plant because it doesn't move, unless it's Himalayan balsam, take a photo. That's the best thing I can recommend when you're reporting invasive species, is make sure you take a photo. And if you can put something like a euro next to it, or even just your hand, it really helps to verify if it is an invasive species. The biggest example there is the Asian hornet earlier on in the year. It was absolutely amazing how much of the public got involved, and they were really keen to try and find them and report them. But we were inundated with hundreds to thousands of reports of what people thought were Asian hornet. But because some people didn't have photos, it's really hard to verify it, or if the photos aren't very clear, they can be difficult as well. But luckily we got lots of photos of those. We had all sorts of things from caterpillars and butterflies to different types of kind of native wasps and things like that. So it is really, really important to take a photo to verify it. And as we were talking about earlier on in the presentation, if you want to take further action, I know for quite a lot of people, sometimes having that physical pulling up something like the Himalayan balsam and going home knowing that you've kind of physically done something for that day is really, really motivating sometimes. So try and find a local action group around you that might already be involved in removing invasive species, or if you really want to have a go, like Noel did in Sligo, you can have a think about setting up a group, and you can always contact me for information on how to set up that local action group as well. And then just helping raising awareness of the issues as much as we can. Sometimes it unfortunately takes a species like the Asian hornet to get people to be aware of the situation again. It kind of needs to be a bit of a constant push there to make people aware of it. So just making it as fun as possible by having events for people to come and do, and activities for people to come and do as well. And Invasive Species Week it's a different time this year. It's in June. It starts from the 22nd of June and lasts a week. There'll be lots of activities going on. So make sure you check the National Biodiversity Data Centre website. But if there's any events that you would like to set up to raise awareness, that's a really, really good week to choose to run lots of events and things as well. And we can offer support on that.